and welcome to A Conversation with Neal Morse. I'm your host, Eric Miller. This is part of the Pods and Sods Network, and I want to thank you, first off, as always, for clicking the download button or the subscribe button or whatever combination of buttons you've clicked in order to find this episode. It's always appreciated. It was a real treat to chat with Neal. I'm a prog guy going way back, and Spock's beard was awesome, and Neal Morse Band is awesome, and we get into all that kind of stuff. A lot of his early influences. Obviously some Spock's beard stuff, Morse Fest that he does every year. Some of his collaborations through the years, like Kerry Livgren, Steve Hackett, obviously Mike Portnoy, a bunch of stuff like that. And I think we even touch on Frank Zappa. So really great conversation from a really fantastic artist. And obviously we talk about his newer record, Similitude of a Dream. And yeah, it was great. So hopefully you will enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. So without any further ado, a conversation with Mr. Neal Morse. Gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Neal Morse. Welcome, Neal.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to chat. You have... obviously you're one of the most prolific guys out there, and you have, a seriously long discography in many forms. But I always kind of go back to the beginning when I'm fortunate to chat with people. So can you maybe talk about first discovering music? I think you had a musical family.
Yes, my dad was a choir director, and so I was learning to sing harmony when I was a little guy.
Right.
And music was really the focus in our family, too. I mean, some families are sports families. We were a music family, and
right.
That was really the thing, not just in my family, but it seemed like in the culture of, the 60s and 70s. I was born in 1960, so, instead of, watching movies or playing games or whatever, we all were listening to records and bringing records over to each other's houses and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
So
right.
It seemed like music was just everywhere, and it was all that I cared about. It's
Right.
still very much at the forefront of what I care about, so it's been a great ride.
Right. And your brother Alan's slightly older, if I'm not mistaken, right? Just maybe a couple years older?
Yeah, he's, I think, 2 years older,
Okay.
A year and a half, like that.
Okay. That's always one of those things, like if you have, an older brother, your tastes tend to lean a bit older, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah. I was in a band, I started playing guitar when I was 9.
Okay.
When I was playing keyboards, before that, I was just, a kid taking piano lessons, but, I was learning how to play Let It Be, when I was 9 and stuff like that.
Wow.
But, I was in my brother's band. My brother Richard is also older, and he played drums, and Al played bass, I think it was, in the beginning.
Right.
And I was playing guitar and singing, and we all sang. We did a lot of 3-part harmony stuff, See Me, Feel Me, and the Listening to You was a 3-part harmony thing, and we all sang. And so, I was in a band with my older brothers, and so I was friends with all of their older friends, and so, and I looked older, which was a cool thing when you're 12, which isn't so cool when you're older. But
Right.
Yeah, I always had the kind of baby face and looked younger, and
Right.
And so when we were kids, I think that was kind of an irritant to him, but now he's the beneficiary.
Right, exactly. And of course your brother Schmengi played accordion, right?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. Polka extravaganza, of
Right.
course, yes.
Nice. Obviously your influences, are, have been sort of talked about widely. I guess the 70s, a lot of progressive rock, Genesis, things like that. The one that interests me, and I could be projecting this on you because I'm a massive fan of Kansas, but I hear some similarities to you and Kansas. Were they a big influence?
Yeah, sure. A little later.
Okay.
They came along later. I did that first heard Kansas at the Song for America period.
Right.
And Yeah, that was tremendous. But that was several years after the whole Yes and ELP kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know what year that would have been. Probably, I'm guessing 76, maybe 75.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure, but
right.
Yeah. So but they were definitely an influence, and it was such a cool thing that they became so immensely popular. Then it was great.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is I want to sort of refer back to it a bit later. So, and another thing that this is kind of an out of left field question, talking about influences, because I've had a few guys from the Zappa universe on lately. Are you a Zappa guy? Did you grow up into that?
I was very much a Zappa guy. I was actually at just another band from LA concert when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
At Polypavilion with Flo and Eddie. I was there.
Wow.
My dad was my dad was a music teacher and kind of an experimental guy, and so he would take us to Frank Zappa concerts when we were little kids, which is like extremely kind of crazy, I think, by today's standards. I don't think I would do that with my kids. But I mean, some of the stuff that was going on at those concerts in those days was pretty wild,
Yeah, no kidding.
But I was into Zappa up until Live at the Roxy, the Roxy and Elsewhere album.
Right.
And after that, I kind of got out of it. But I know a lot of Zappa's music.
Nice. Yeah, just kind of taking a stab because I had Adrian Belew on recently and Dweezil, and I got Zappa on the brain. So when I was listening to your new record and, obviously familiar with your career, I sort of thought that might be in there.
Yeah, you can definitely hear a Zappa influence in parts of the new album.
Nice. Just a question about, I guess, kind of Spock's beard and sort of maybe these in-between years growing up. So, Spock's Beard, The Light came out, and I think you're in your mid-30s by that point.
Yeah, that's right.
Were you in your 20s, were you like a struggling musician in California? Did you pursue other careers, or were you always, fighting to get a break as a musician?
I was always trying to make it in music. I burned every other bridge. I didn't graduate high school. I was the classic, I think I had the conversation with my dad, just the classic conversation where he was telling me that, I shouldn't close any doors. And I said, I don't want to have anything to fall back on. I don't want to have any other door open to me. I'm going to do this or not, kind of thing.
Oh, boy.
Do or die. And
right.
So I was in a lot of bands with my brothers and also with other people in L.A. I grew up in L.A. and I was trying to make it in music all through my teens and my 20s. And got close, almost, we were planning, what sports car we were going to buy, kind of close.
Right. And this would have been in the 80s.
We had offers to get signed. I had offers to get signed in several different groups, but then something always happened and it fell apart. For example, in like '85, I was in a band that was managed by Freddie DeMann, who was managing Michael Jackson at the Thriller album.
Wow.
Time. And we were going to be produced by Ken Scott, who had just produced Missing Persons. I mean, this was the top stuff of the time.
Right.
And so we thought we were going to make it. And I was also, after that particularly, I was really focused on making it as a singer-songwriter.
Right.
I was going for Billy Joel, Elton John, Mark Cohn kind of thing for a lot of years.
Right.
And recorded and wrote a lot of stuff, and had a great band and played all the clubs, but just nothing ever grabbed hold.
Never went down the path of like that L.A. sort of, for lack of a better term, hair metal, because that would have been late '80s, right? Mid '80s.
Yeah, I did a little of that, but that was never really my thing. I was making a living playing in cover bands.
Okay.
So I was playing all over in Orange County and all over L.A. For a lot of years, just kind of floundering and getting more depressed and more drunk, actually.
the edge. Put on your face, put these people in their place. Check your hat, check your coat, try to keep your checks afloat. Don't you crack, cause they might see that you're not who you're supposed to be. Keep on firing this hard wire wiring. You can't win, you can't seem to break free. I'm on the edge one more time. Out on the edge in my mind. Take a rock in the ledge. Yes, I'm out on the edge. Inside goes, outside it feels like a night solid ripping wheels of time. You don't know my mind, so I'm telling you now. You cannot hold me. You cannot hold me down, 'cause I feel like you. Every chance I get, I just can't hang. I'm out on the edge one more time. Out on the edge in my mind. Between a rock and a ledge. Yes, I'm out. I'm out on the edge. I can't see the bottom. I can't look down. Yeah. Well, I'm out on the edge one more time. Reaching across the water for a drink of wine. The empty glass is fading. The children are all waving, and I'm out on the edge.
that kind of leads me to the question about, about Spock's Beard. Obviously, when you left Spock's Beard, it was, for sort of a personal change of direction, a journey of faith, right?
Yeah.
Was there, like, up until that point, you mentioned about drinking and things like that. Up until that point, was there something missing? Maybe it's hindsight is 2020, but what sort of led you to that religious awakening, if you will?
Well, yeah, it's a crazy story. The beginning of the '90s, I kind of went through this whole valley of death period. Just, my life's over.
Right.
Here I am in my 30s now. Never got a record deal, never got a publishing deal. Have done, essentially nothing. And Spock's was kind of born out of that. It was like, well, if we're going to go down, let's go down doing what we really, really love.
Right.
And so I started writing this crazy prog music. And it's kind of an interesting thing that when we, meaning me and my brother Al, when we gave up having commercial success, that became the only time that we really had commercial success.
Right.
Kind of a crazy thing. And then after all of that, and then to finally get to the point where I could support my family doing my own music, which is, kind of like the dream, right?
Right. Of
and to get to that point, and then, in a profound moment of prayer, I felt like God just said, it's time to come out. And so I didn't know what I was going to do or where I was going, but I just really felt like I felt the still small voice of God speak to my heart and say, it's time. I kind of felt like maybe it was coming. Sometimes deep inside you'll feel like something's coming.
Right.
And you don't really want to face it. And then one day I was out running, and I just felt like God said, it's time, and And I did know. I knew. And that was quite a crazy thing, and everything was on the line. My relationships with my friends in the band, my relationship with my brother, our livelihood, how was I going to support the kids, and all of that was on the line. But my wife and I both felt like if it was God, whatever God was calling for, that it would be for the best ultimately, and
right.
And it has. But it's quite a thing. I felt like I needed to finish the album we were working on, which was the Snow album,
right,
and then quit the band, which is what I wound up doing.
Yeah. How about professionally? Like, you talk about relationships, but professionally, this was something that you described you struggled for through the 80s, 90s, and then here you have it. Like, that had a big concern? Like, boy, am I going to alienate the audience I finally been blessed with?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I forgot to mention that. That was a big one too. It's like, wow, I finally have an audience, and now we're probably going to lose it all.
Right.
Especially because I didn't even know if God was going to have me continue on in music even. I was in a place of total surrender, and I like, well, if I wind up working at Starbucks or whatever it is, I'll do it, Lord, whatever it is that you want.
Right.
And it's kind of like that stepping out in faith and not knowing what's going to happen. And,
right.
And then after that, about 4 or 5 months later, I began to hear all the music that became the Testimony album, which was a big surprise, really. I didn't really know that that's what I was going to be doing.
Right.
But
God
has his way.
But by the same token, that is so naturally you, right? Dare I say. Like, what else
Sure.
would you.
Sure, yeah. But I really didn't know. I was, I tried, I took a stab at writing some kind of, like, more Christian music, like, traditional CCM kind of songs.
Right.
And I really like those songs. I made an album called God Won't Give Up. I put it out quite a bit later because I was just sort of toying around with things and exploring
right.
what might be next. But I didn't know, if he was going to have me be a music minister somewhere, or or cleaning toilets. I didn't
Right,
know.
right.
So, so it's been an amazing thing, and now, of course, with this new album is even just like, wow, look what God is doing. It's amazing.
Yeah, no kidding. That's incredible. I do want to ask a few questions about that. Speaking of Snow, however, you've recently reunited and performed that in its entirety. Is that intended for release? Can you talk about that if that's the case?
Yeah, we recorded and videotaped the entire performance that we did at something called Morse Fest.
Right.
I didn't name it; somebody else did.
Right, right.
Yeah, that'll be released next year sometime.
Awesome. And sort of tying two things together. You mentioned the Testimony record, and the reason I brought up Kansas is because there's a bit of a parallel with your sort of spiritual coming out or awakening, and that of Kerry Livgren, right? He wrestled with the same issues, and he ends up playing on that record on Long Story. And I was kind of curious about that. Like, how did you connect with him? Because it's, from a fan perspective, it feels like a bit of a similar journey or like a kindred path. How did you connect with him for that?
Well, this really interesting thing happened around that time. I was talking to a friend who lives south of Nashville, and I was just saying, I've never been down this road. It would be great to counsel with somebody who has done something like this before. Quit your band for a kind of a little bit nebulous kind of reason, and the guy said, well, I have Kerry Livgren's phone number. I could give it to you if you want.
Right.
I said, what? Like, yeah, we did some work together like 5 years ago, or I didn't even know that. So I said, well, yeah, sure. So he gave me the number, and I called it, and Kerry answered the phone. And I was like, hi, this is Neal Morse. He said, oh, hi, yeah, I've heard about you. And he answered the phone. I mean, it all happened within like 5 minutes. It was amazing. And we talked a lot, and I have notes in my Bible from some of the things that he told me,
right.
What he had experienced. And later on, I felt like I should go and see him.
Right.
Not just, do file sharing or whatever, because he played on the Testimony album. And my wife has some relatives in Kansas, in the south part of Kansas, southern part. And we were going to be visiting there, and I thought, well, I should just drive up to Topeka. And so I called him, and he said, yeah, sure, and went up there and had some amazing conversations with him, and what a lovely guy, and we talked about all kinds of things, spiritual things, and music and gear and all kinds of stuff. And
right, that's great.
It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, and probably to a degree, a bit of an affirmation that, there is life after that, redirection, right?
Yeah, sure. And, he had a lot of good advice, and we just kind of compared notes, and it was really interesting. Some of the things that he told me wound up being used on the next album, like the one album. The original lyric for "Help Me" was, I used a line from him was, "Will the real God please stand up?"
Right.
Which is something he told me that he had prayed in his hotel room. That was when he became a Christian, because he felt like Jesus said, "It's me," essentially. And so that was really interesting and really influenced me in a lot of good ways.
It's surrounded by rejectors and bill collectors circling all around. The girl I loved went off and got married to a millionaire. For $50 I'd play 5 hours in the desert air. Some of us have to hit bottom before we'll ever see above the ground.
Speaking of Kansas, in a more tangential way, what's the future of Flying Colors?
As funny as you should mention it, we are getting together in December to write again.
Nice.
And we have a full week, so I wouldn't be surprised. Hopefully we can write a whole album, I hope.
In a week, right?
Yeah, well, we work pretty fast. I think, the other times the first album, I think, was done in about that amount of time, at least just the writing part,
right.
Not the full creation. Then, kind of everybody will take the templates home and do their tracks. But we might be able to if the juices are flowing and everything goes well. But I can't say. I mean, I'll be happy with whatever happens. I'm sure it'll be amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Continuing along the collaborations theme, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about, obviously Mike Portnoy, kind of your longtime musical brother, if you will. How would you describe sort of his impact on your work? Like, what flavors does he add to your recipes?
Man, he adds a lot. He has a lot of power and energy.
Okay.
There's so much power and energy in his playing, but also he's very wise and intuitive. Okay. He's wise in ways that I'm not, I think, and it's hard to describe. He has a great overview ability. He'll come into the sessions and be already thinking about the overview of the album, and I'm more like an ant crawling along a mosaic or something. I'm just kind of like, going piece by piece, feeling my way. And he has this way of looking at the whole picture that's very, very valuable. And it's been a great collaboration, that's for sure.
Awesome, no doubts. Same question kind of for Randy, because you've worked with him quite a bit. What does he bring out in you, or what have you learned from him as a player?
Randy's a little bit more random. I mean, you never know what he's going to come up with or what kind of thing. That's really great, though. He comes up with really different things. Sometimes he'll come up with great lyrics, and he's like, I don't normally write lyrics, but I mean, he fed me the lyrics to the end of the One album in such a perfect way. I was like astounded. It was amazing. I was sitting there doing scratch vocals, and he was handing me pieces of paper, and I was like, dude, this is amazing. And other parts, he really is very keen on doing different things and not repeating ourselves. And he actually busts me a lot for. I don't listen to my own music that much, so sometimes I'll have an idea that's very similar to another idea that I've done on past albums.
Right.
And he will be very, very helpful in pointing that out and letting me know when I need to change things.
Right.
And he's done some brilliant things that are really hard to describe. Like, okay, we're working on this one piece in E major, and we need to get to B flat minor for the next section or something, and
right.
He'll figure out some really cool, interesting, perfect way to transition. He has an amazing mind for music.
And obviously they both appear on the new record, which I want to get to, is the Similitude of a Dream. And this is, a double album, concept album. And as I understand it, it's kind of based on, or loosely based on, the Pilgrim's Progress, this sort of 17th century Christian literature. Can you explain sort of how you came to that? Or I guess maybe a better question is, like, how does the story arc flow through the songs for you? Because it's a double album, and like, how do you even approach that?
Well, with great help. Like, the guys really help. We were all kind of sketching together. I mean, I started the sketch, but then kind of everybody got out their paintbrushes, and we all kind of sketched together. And, I can't leave out the ultimate thing, which is I feel like God was the great orchestrator of the whole thing.
Right.
In fact, when I started it, I wasn't even sure that I even wanted to do it. And I know it. Mike definitely didn't want to do it. I mean, Mike was right up, and I can talk about this openly because it's on the making of a documentary that comes with a special edition. Mike was like totally opposed to having it be a double, for example.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't really very enrolled or keen on the story. I mean, he was just kind of rolling with the music, and he liked a lot, loved a lot of the song ideas. But we got up to about 3/4 of the way through the first disc, and he was like, well, I think it's time to start wrapping it up and make it a single disc. And I was feeling like, and some of the other guys were feeling like, well, I mean, there's a whole lot more to this story. I mean, at that point, we were only to maybe page 9 of the book.
Oh, boy. Right, wow.
Yeah, say a 360-page book or whatever. I was like, well, there's a lot more. I just didn't feel like it felt like it should wrap up. I felt like I want to go into these other territories. I want him to meet all these other people, and in the book. I mean, he meets 1 million people. We've only touched on very few, actually.
Right.
That was just the way that it kind of went down. We spent a lot of time in the music, kind of just even setting up him leaving the City of Destruction and beginning the journey. We kind of spent a lot of time on that, and so we were 20 minutes in, and he hasn't he's barely even begun his journey. So I felt like we needed to explore the story and explore the music further, and Mike was very resistant. And in fact, it got really bad. We had we had what I called Miserable Monday and then Miracle Tuesday.
Okay.
We had this one day where we actually, he and I walked out of the studio, basically. It's like, I was like, that's it. I can't do this anymore. And then the next day, I woke up in the morning feeling like I needed to come in and write and kind of maybe make the second disc more better, basically.
Right.
It really wasn't good enough. I mean, the sketch that I had done was so rough, and so I came in and started working on it, and then by the time Mike showed up around noon, and he showed up like he came in with a whole new attitude and apologized to us all, and I apologized too. It kind of made up, and then it was like, okay, here's what I've got. What do you? And Mike had all these ideas, and then it just flowed. I mean, we finished the piece in a day and a half after that, and then he started tracking his drums, and by the time we were done on Thursday, I think he was done with the drums on Thursday. That's how fast it went after that.
Wow.
He gathered us around and said, guys, I think we've made the album of our careers.
Rest while I get a
When you use the word sketch a couple times, so when you say that, does that mean that you have, so you took the source material, if you will, and you built a bit of a plan, right, of, we need to hit this, this, and this in terms of topics included in the book and maybe beginning, middle, and end, and then you fill in songs to hit those marks, or you create songs to hit those chapters, if you will? Is that the approach?
Well, no, it was a little bit more like, okay, here's this idea for this thing.
Okay.
And here's this little idea for this part. Like, for example, it might be, okay, I've got this idea. You got to get out of the city of destruction. I've got this chorus. And then I've got this idea for when he's leaving and his friends are trying to get him to come back. I've got this idea of, like, it makes no sense to me. They're trying to convince him, and he's just saying, man, it doesn't make any sense to stay when you feel like you have to go.
Right.
That kind of, it's more like that, and then like a little snippet of an idea, now he's talking to his wife, and he's trying to convince her to go, but she won't, and so you got these little bits, and then the challenge is to try and figure out how to make it work musically and story-wise.
Right.
So a lot of times that's how it is for me. I'll have like an idea for a touching spiritual part, and then and here's an evil theme. We for the evil parts, for his battle with the monster, and all the rough stuff that happens, and so it's more like that, like a bunch of little pieces, and sometimes we even get out a chalkboard and write all the pieces that we want to put in. Mike says, "Put me in, coach." And writes all the sections on, and then when we come up to a place where we're not sure where we want to go, we'll sometimes look at the board and go, well, could we do Bill's slow theme here, or what makes sense? And then we'll kick it around as a team, like, people will throw out different ideas, and then one will stick, and then we'll do that for a while, and then come to a place and then not know where we should go. It's like you come to a bunch of crossroads, and you have to decide which way to go.
That's really incredible. It sounds, it's very cinematic. That's the way films are done, like a director's storyboards, right? It sounds somewhat similar. And you can see it just, in title alone, the journey is, Man in the Iron Cage. Well, you said makes no sense, right? You got the line, your heart is on cruise control. And then you got, Man in the Iron Cage, where, it's sort of about breaking out or escaping, I suppose. And then immediately after that, you got Freedom Song. And then a confrontation battle, so it really follows like a design, or that's really an incredible undertaking, and certainly fascinating, and boy, you achieve it.
Well, thank you, thanks. Yeah, we didn't really know what we were doing. You have certain parts that you really liked, and that came directly from the book. The Man in the Iron Cage is directly from the book.
Okay.
That character, and that's one of the characters that he meets, and I thought that was, an interesting part. But how to write what he says and make it real and palatable and relatable,
right,
was it's all very challenging. But once we got in the flow, I feel like once we stopped fighting what it wanted to be, it kind of wrote itself.
What was it about that particular piece of literature that really hooked you?
Well, to be honest, it didn't at first. I was kind of reading it going, I don't know, is this going to really work? It took a little while for me to get sold on it. And then it was during the initial writing sessions in January that I began to feel like, okay, yeah, this is good. This is where we need to go. But we all came to that realization at different points, But writing about spiritual journeys is something that I love to do. I've done that on many different albums. I've written about my own spiritual journey, and then about Martin Luther's spiritual journey, and a lot of different things like that. And so it's definitely in my bag to do something like this. But I think for it to come out the way that it did is definitely a product of the team, and particularly the addition of Bill and Eric.
Yeah, would you consider this maybe your most ambitious?
That's difficult for me to say because that's like comparing albums, and that's something that I just kind of try to stay away from because they are kind of like children. They're all, you love them and they're all beautiful in their own ways. But I would say that definitely for this group and what this is a very ambitious. I don't know if it's the most ambitious, but it's a very ambitious album, and I'm absolutely in awe of how it's turned out, and also how people are receiving it. It's one thing to create something, but it's quite another how it lives in their hearts and minds, and that's what I'm really interested to see.
Yeah, and if just to go slightly in an editorial direction, if as a listener, you sort of you could hear the concept and see the double album, and like it could potentially be off-putting as like, oh, that's prog, whatever, pretension or something, right? But it is not. Like, it flows, and I think that's one of your unique strengths, is that you can bring these things to realization and make them accessible.
Yeah, well, that's what we try to do. We try to have melodies and songs. I mean, just because it's prog, it doesn't mean that it. I think a lot of times people forget that music, in order to be effective, I think needs to have melodies and hooks and things. I feel like all the good progressive rock, all the good stuff, the good stuff from Yes and Kansas and all that. There was very often a very, very good chorus that you could sing along to, and beautiful melodies in the instrumentals. And so we always try to keep that going.
Nice. Just kind of one more sideways question, because a lot of your themes obviously are focused around your faith, and you pursue different styles of music, a lot of variety in your catalog. Before we started recording, you said you're working on some blues stuff. Do you have an affinity to sort of the Southern gospel sound, like Blind Boys of Alabama, Staple Singers, like that kind of stuff appeal to you?
Oh, yeah. It's, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but it's one thing about me is that I really enjoy and love, like, all musical styles pretty much. If they're done with heart. Yeah, oh yeah. I enjoy all that stuff. Yeah.
And the reason I mention that is because, like, Christian music is slightly different than gospel music, right? And I'm always kind of trying to figure out why there's a line and what that line is, and do you know what I mean? Yeah. I guess it's primarily stylistic, isn't it? Right.
It's like the gospel stuff is generally considered to be a little more on the R&B side, I guess, really.
Right.
And Christian stuff might be a little bit more on the straight-ahead rock or pop side.
Right. It's interesting because I think they would be natural allies in a way.
I think they are, actually. I mean, I've been on, different gigs or sessions with Christian guys and gospel guys, and yeah, I think generally it's very friendly. Great.
Cool. Well, I wanted to. I guess you got a lot of tour dates ahead of you.
Coming to a city near you.
That was the intention, to do this record in its entirety. What's the set list looking like, or is it too early to say?
It is definitely the record in its entirety.
Wow.
And then all we need to talk about is what the encores are going to be.
That's great. And will you mix it up, or do you kind of have the same encores?
I don't know yet. I really don't know yet. But I think it's going to be an amazing tour. I'm feeling it. We're pulling out all the stops and going to have some special things, some very moving parts, and it's going to be a very special tour. I hope everybody can come out.
Really cool. Really cool. Well, sir, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I'm digging the new record. Like I said, it's accessible, and like I said, at first glance it could be daunting, but if you're a fan of good music and that has prog leanings or is just full on prog, it is, I can't recommend it highly enough. So thank you for putting together a brilliant album.
Well, thank you, Eric. Thanks a lot for
thank you. And
for
people,
the good discussion, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. And people can find you on nealmorse.com is your website, and you're active on the Facebooks and the interwebs and all that kind of good stuff, right?
Sure, yeah. Follow me on Twitter, Neal Morse, and with an A, and MORSE. And also radiantrecords.com is the place to order stuff if you want to.
Nice. Now, I would be remiss in asking, so it might be too soon because this album is just coming out. You're just hitting the road, but you already talked about Flying Colors writing in December. Anything else on the horizon that you want to make mention of?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it's all about the new record and the tour, and beyond that, I don't have much of anything planned. If you want to join the Neal Morse Inner Circle, my fan club thing, that's what that blues record I'm working on is for. That's something you can look into at nealmorse.com. But other than that, that's it. Nice.
Very cool. Yeah, that's it. Just a double concept album and a tour. And that's it, right?
Right. Yeah, that's it. That's enough.
All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you down the road.
All right. Thanks, Eric. I look forward to meeting you, man.
Change, but now it feels so wrong. There's mountains in my way, and I just can't go on. How did I get so far gone to who I am today? How did I get so far the man's advice.
Thanks again for listening to this episode. You can find more of Neal's work and obviously his tour dates. He's always busy at nealmorse.com. Neal is obviously Neal, morse.com. You can find more Pods and Sods on our website, which is podsodcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes, where hopefully you will feel inspired to leave a rating or a review. That's always a great thing, to go find some new hopefully kind words from some listeners. You can also find us on Facebook. So, yeah, once again, thanks for listening, and I will close with some words of wisdom that I always close with from Mr. Bill Hicks. Thank you.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. We have a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account and my family. This has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill those good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok? But it doesn't matter, because it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever in peace.